Hey there, welcome back to the channel. I'm Partik, and I want to show you a really cool feature that we just launched here at Agentuity, which is email destinations. Now, what that basically means is you can now set up your AI agents to actually send you an email. So today we're going to take a look at an example to see this in action, but before we can do all that, we first need to configure our AI agent so that it actually knows where to send the email. So let's go ahead and dive into it, and I'll show you how that works. So over in the Agentuity Cloud app or the web app, when we go into a project and click into an agent, you'll see the same I/O visualization on the right, which is how you set up your inbound and outbound connections to your agent. And if we go to the bottom here, you'll see a new outbound email destination, and you'll be able to set the sender, the recipients, which can include multiple emails if you just separate them with a comma, as well as the subject line. So while we're on this window, I want to explain a few things about the sender part of this. So for any project that you create where you want email integration, we give you this noreply@agentuity.run as a default address. But let's say you wanted to set up a project where you can also send an email to your agent. Well then, if we come over to the inbound side of things, you can see we have this default email address that you can use to send emails and send your agent off to do tasks for you. And this address is basically just your ID, the agent ID that automatically is created when you create a project with Agentuity, with the @agentuity.run ending. So let's say we save that so that we can send our agent emails, and you'll see that pop up here. But if we go back to the outbound side, now you'll see that we have that option as the sender. So in this way, you can send emails back and forth with the same email address. So your agent will be able to use the same email that you would use to call it to send some information back. Now, I want to note that there's actually a third option. We also support custom domains for your agent. At the moment, you will have to reach out to us if you wanted that set up and configured for your organization, but we're hoping to have that process streamlined in the future, so keep an eye out for any updates. But regardless of which sender option you choose, this is where we'll have to set up all of the information about the email that our agent will send. And so that's another thing that I want to mention. At the moment, you do have to set all of this up in the web app, so we don't have an option for programmatically configuring some of these options, but that's another feature that we're hoping to have for you soon. But with all that being said, let me set up this agent so that we can see a quick example to show you how it works. Great, so I just set up the agent with my personal email and a subject, and we still have this inbound webhook that we can use to send commands. So that's what we're going to do. So let's go ahead and take a look at this example. So the example I'm going to show you today is pretty simple. We're just going to simulate this customer authentication service, and we're going to send in a bunch of curl commands to act as service updates. So we're going to send an OK status when the latency of this customer authentication service is looking all good. It's at 50 milliseconds. And then we'll send a warning when the latency is ramping up before we send a couple of messages saying that the service is failing. And at the end, we'll send the all OK message and let our agent know that everything is back up and running. So basically what we should see here is when this command gets sent, our agent should be able to send us a status update saying that the authentication service is down. And then over here, when we get to the OK message, the last command we'll send, we want to see that everything's back up and running, so we want to get a all OK message. Now, in terms of the main agent logic, it's pretty simple. So I'm using Python, but it'll be very similar if you're using JavaScript and want to follow along at home. But the first step is just going to be parsing the incoming command and getting some of the information like the service name and the status. Now, for us to actually send a meaningful report, we're going to do two things. We're first going to store the service status, which is basically the latest status update that we just got sent. So we're going to store that using Agentuity's storage APIs, specifically the key vector storage or KV store. And then to make sure that our agent actually can remember the past commands that we sent it, we're going to also create a service history KV store. And that's going to get all of the status updates. But once we do all that, we're just going to have the LLM decide whether or not we should send an alert. And then we're going to have it also generate the HTML content for us. So we're basically going to let the agent do a lot of the heavy lifting and see what happens. Now, in terms of the actual code to set up this email process, it's just this one line here. So we're just going to return the HTML response, and because we have the outbound email connection, this will get sent straight to the email address that we set up. And it's really as easy as that. So you can see how cool this is, that you can just have your agent send you an email with just this one line. So if you've got existing projects, it's really easy to adjust them and incorporate this email integration, or you can just create a new project and have your agent send you emails. Now, there's one thing that I want to mention, which is important to know when you're trying to add email integration into your projects, which is this empty response method. Now, as I mentioned before, the only thing that we need to do to actually get our agent the content it needs for it to route that over to our email is just returning a response, in this case, an HTML response. But you want to be careful for the parts of your logic where you don't want to send that email, which in this case for us is when the LLM decides that we should not send an alert. And for cases like that, we don't actually want to send back like a JSON payload or some text, because that'll still trigger the agent to send an email. So that's where this empty method comes in handy. It allows you to return an empty response when you're working with the Agentuity Python or JavaScript SDKs. And so for us in this project, we're just going to put that here. So in the event that we don't send an email, it'll come down here and just return an empty response. And we won't get an email with a report for every status update that we give it. So that's just a way to kind of make sure your logic is nice and neat. But with all that being said, let's go ahead and start testing our agent to see if it can actually send us some emails. So I'm going to go over back to our commands and just start sending out a couple commands. And so that first OK message was sent successfully. So let's go ahead and give the warning message next. And now before we actually send the critical failure message, which is going to trigger that first email, let's go ahead and see if our agent is actually keeping track of all of this in its memory thanks to the KV stores. All right, so over back in the web app, let's look at the key value services. And we can see that we have the service history working correctly. So it was able to log both of these status updates that we gave with some timestamps and the metadata that we sent as well. And then the service status is just the latest message. So we got the warning status sent second, and it's going to log that as well. So let's go back over and send the failure message and see if we get an email. So back over in the terminal, we just sent that failed status update, and that was received successfully. So our agent at this point should have created a nice report for us. Awesome. So if we look at my Gmail, which is where I set things up, we get a new failure alert. And we can see that the customer authentication service is currently down. And the agent was able to keep track of all of the recent commands that we sent it with a nice message as well. So we know that that worked, but let's see if it can send the OK message or the all clear signal once the service is back up and running. So back over in the terminal, we're just going to send these last two commands. So there's our failed message again, and it shouldn't send a message or an email for that. But once everything's back up and running, it should send us a new email. Great, and we can see that the recovery notice was also sent. So the agent was able to track all 5 of the commands that we sent it and tell us that the current status is back up and running. So to wrap things up and summarize, we now offer email destinations as a way for you to allow your agents to send you an email. I hope you found this example useful, and keep an eye out for further integrations and more feature releases that we'll be putting out in the near future. All right, thanks so much for watching, and we'll see you next time.